There is one number that the air defense industry never puts in a brochure. Not the intercept rate, not the range, not the radar coverage area or the reaction time or the number of simultaneous targets the system can track. The number they never show you is how many rounds the battery carries before it goes silent. Because that number, the magazine capacity, is the flaw that makes every expensive air defense system on the planet vulnerable to a weapon that costs $500. And they knew it before they sold you the system. Let's get into it. A Patriot battery is one of the most sophisticated weapons ever built. Radar that can track dozens of targets simultaneously. Interceptor missiles that can kill a ballistic warhead moving at Mach 5. A command system that processes incoming threats faster than any human operator could. When it works, it is extraordinary. It carries between 8 and 16 interceptor rounds per launcher unit. That is the number. When those rounds are gone, the battery is silent. It cannot fire. It cannot intercept. The radar still works. The operators are still there. But the system that kills incoming threats is empty, and it takes time to reload. Stay with me, because what happens in that reload window is the single flaw that renders billions of dollars in air defense investment vulnerable to an adversary with a warehouse full of $500 drones. Here is what that window looks like in practice. A Patriot battery fires its last interceptor at 11:47 p.m. The incoming threat is destroyed. The operators immediately begin the reload sequence. Under ideal conditions, pre-staged reload vehicles, no enemy pressure, clear access routes, that process takes between 30 minutes and several hours depending on configuration. For that entire window, the battery is silent. The radar still sees what's coming. The system just has nothing left to fire at it. That is not a scenario the defense industry discusses at procurement briefings. It is a scenario that every serious adversary has wargamed, calculated, and built attack sequences around. Here is the tactic that every serious military has now studied and that every adversary has now considered. You don't attack the Patriot battery, you bait it. Send 50 cheap drones toward the defended target. Small, low radar cross-section, flying patterns that force the battery to engage. The battery fires. 50 interceptors launched against 50 drones. The magazine empties. The battery goes silent. Now send the actual threat. The ballistic missile. The cruise missile. The target the entire operation was designed to deliver. It arrives during the reload window, the gap between the last interceptor fired and the moment the battery is ready to fire again. The most expensive air defense system on the market cannot intercept a threat it has no rounds left to shoot. This is not a new vulnerability. In 2019, the attack on Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq oil facility used exactly this logic. Not a direct assault on the Patriot batteries defending the region. A coordinated attack that exploited the limits of the coverage and engagement capacity, forcing the system to make choices about what to prioritize, creating gaps, and sending threats through those gaps. 5% of global oil production offline overnight. Billions of dollars in American air defense technology on the perimeter. The attack got through. The official assessment cited multiple factors: coverage angles, radar geometry, attack direction. What it did not prominently feature was the fundamental constraint that no amount of radar improvement changes. You can only fire as many interceptors as you carry, and every adversary planning an attack knows exactly how many that is. Here's why this flaw cannot be fixed without admitting the entire procurement framework was built on the wrong assumption. The defense industry's answer to magazine depletion is cheaper interceptors. If you can make the interceptor cost $10,000 instead of $3 million, the math changes. The swarm becomes less effective. The reload window becomes less catastrophic. This is true. It is also decades away from solving the current problem. And while directed energy weapons are being developed, tested, and eventually deployed, the systems protecting cities, military bases, and critical infrastructure right now are the ones with the 16-round magazine, deployed today, in the threat environment that exists today, against adversaries who have known the reload window number for years. The development timeline for the solution and the deployment timeline for the threat are not synchronized. The threat is already here. The fix is still in a laboratory. The systems deployed right now, the systems that dozens of countries purchased for billions of dollars based on official intercept rate statistics, are operating with the magazine capacity they have. The reload window exists today, in every battery, in every country that bought one, and the drone swarms designed to exploit that window cost less than the fuel to transport a single Patriot launcher to its deployment site. The companies selling these systems know this. The classified threat assessments that governments receive before approving a purchase describe this vulnerability in technical language designed to be accurate without being alarming. The press conferences announcing the purchase describe only the intercept rate. The two documents describe the same system. They say opposite things about what it does when it matters most. Stay with me, because what happened in Ukraine turned this from a documented vulnerability into a proven operational tactic that every military on Earth watched in real time. Ukrainian forces developed a systematic method for destroying Russian S-300 and S-400 air defense batteries, systems that Russia marketed as immune to this kind of attack. Step 1. Launch a drone toward the battery to force the radar to activate. Step 2. Fire a HARM anti-radiation missile at the radar the moment it activates. Step 3. Repeat until the battery is destroyed, out of interceptors, or relocated. Russian S-400 batteries, each costing hundreds of millions of dollars, were being neutralized by a combination that cost a fraction of a single interceptor round. The magazine ran out. The radar got killed. The battery moved. Then the process repeated at the new location. This is the reload window problem at operational scale. And the vulnerability being exploited in Ukraine is the same vulnerability that had been documented in NATO analysis of Soviet air defense systems for 30 years before the first S-400 was exported. They knew. They sold it anyway. Because the alternative, telling a customer that the most expensive system they were about to buy had a magazine depletion vulnerability that a coordinated drone swarm could exploit, would have cost the contract. The companies that build these systems have shareholders. The executives who approve the design have performance bonuses tied to contract value. The generals who sign off on procurement recommendations retire into board positions at the same defense contractors. None of them have an incentive to say, this system has a 16-round magazine and the adversary has a warehouse of $500 drones. All of them have an incentive to say, this system has an intercept rate above 90%. Both statements are true. Only one of them tells you what happens when the magazine runs out. In 2003, 2 Allied aircraft were destroyed by Patriot batteries in Iraq. A British Tornado, an American FA-18. Both pilots died. The investigation found multiple contributing factors: operator stress, identification failures, the pressure of an active combat environment with simultaneous incoming tracks. What the investigation did not feature prominently was the underlying condition that created those errors. A system under saturation pressure, with operators making split-second decisions about ambiguous returns, in exactly the engagement environment that the magazine depletion tactic is designed to create. When a battery is being baited, forced to engage multiple cheap threats to empty the magazine, the cognitive load on the operators reaches levels the system was not designed to sustain. Mistakes happen. The people who died because of those mistakes are not in the procurement documents. You, the taxpayer in any country that operates one of these systems. The citizen whose government stood at a podium and announced that the billion-dollar purchase guaranteed protection against modern threats. Your government bought a system with a reload window. The adversaries your government is worried about have known about that window since before the purchase was made. The brochure didn't mention it. The classified annex did. Only one of those documents was shown at the press conference. What happens next depends on whether the militaries deploying these systems acknowledge the reload window problem before the next upkike, before the next coordinated swarm empties a magazine and the thing the swarm was covering for arrives unopposed. The system isn't broken. It works exactly as designed. The design carries 16 rounds, and the weapon designed to defeat it costs $500. That question, why a system sold as protection against modern threats was designed with a vulnerability that modern threats are specifically built to exploit, has an answer. It's in the gap between the brochure and the classified annex, and that gap has been there since the day the contract was signed. The next government that announces a billion-dollar air defense purchase will stand at a podium and say what every government says. Our skies are protected. This system is the most capable ever deployed. The threat cannot get through. The classified annex attached to that purchase says something different. System performance degrades significantly under sustained saturation engagement. Magazine capacity presents a critical constraint against coordinated low-cost swarm attacks. Reload windows create coverage gaps that adversaries with knowledge of engagement timelines can exploit. That sentence exists in procurement documents right now, in countries that just signed the contracts, in countries that are about to sign them. The podium statement and the classified annex describe the same system. They say opposite things about what it does when it matters most. One of those documents gets released to the press. The other one explains the reload window. And the $500 drone that empties the magazine before the real threat arrives doesn't read either one. It just flies.